Councilor Del Rochelle.
Present.
Councilor Falco.
Present.
Councilor Knight.
Present.
Councilor Longo Kern. Vice President Marks.
Present.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Present.
President Caviola.
Present. Please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I start this evening, I'd like to wish Councilor Longo Kern a happy birthday. And one more thing. I'd like to thank Steve Brogan and the staff at the cemetery over the Memorial Day weekend. Him and his crew did a great job getting everything ready, and all the volunteers who put the flags out there. Thank you to everyone. I think it was a great time had by all. I wish the weather held out a little more. But again, thank you to Steve and his staff. Motions, orders, resolutions. 17493, offered by Councilor Knight. Whereas May 26, 2017 marks the second anniversary of the passing of firefighter Timothy Brennan, be it resolved that the Medford City Council hold a moment of silence in his memory, and be it further resolved that the 5/30/17 Medford City Council meeting be dedicated in memoriam to firefighter Timothy Brennan. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank my council colleagues for supporting this resolution. As we're all aware, Timothy Brennan passed away some years ago with some complications to a health issue, but he was the consummate professional public servant, and he's someone that dedicated his life to the fire safety here of the residents in the community of Medford. He's sadly missed. His presence is sadly missed. I know his brothers and sisters down at the fire station miss him as well. I'd like to just take an opportunity to extend my deep condolences to the family once again, and ask that my council colleagues support the resolution and remembering Timmy on the anniversary day of his passing.
Thank you. On the motion by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Councilor Knight for putting this on tonight's agenda. Tim was a good friend of mine, and as Councilor Knight mentioned, the Brennan family is synonymous with public safety in this community, and have been providing the residents of this community with great public safety for many decades in this community. And with the loss of Tim at such a young age, and someone that had a very promising future, it was real devastating. And I just want to thank Councilor Knight for putting this on tonight in remembrance of not only a great firefighter, but a good friend.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Marks. All those in favor? The ayes have it. Motion passes. 17488. Offered by Councilor Longo Kern. Be it resolved that the Director of Public Works update the Medford City Council with regards to the stop sign that is down with a cone on top of Brookside Parkway. Councilor Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. I did receive an email complaining about this. I think the stop sign was left in the middle of the street, and a resident of Medford had to move it over to the side. I did contact the Department of Public Works. They said they would take care of it, and I wanted to just get an update on that, because after they said they'd take care of it, I think there was just a cone on top of it. So I've been noticing a lot of cones and big barrels in different places around the city, and I'm not sure if that means, you know, I'm assuming that means we're getting to it. But obviously that stop sign needs to go up where it needs to go, or it needs to be taken off the, you know, side of the road. Public safety issues, obviously, when you have things either in the middle of the street or the side of the road. So if we just could get an update with regards to when this is going to be reinstalled or removed, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councilor Longo Kern.
Motion for suspension of rules. Second.
Motion for suspension by Vice President Marks. Oh, I'm sorry. On the motion by Councilor Longo Kern, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. Motion for suspension by Councilor Marks to take up
Take up paper 17-487, Mr.
17-487. That is in Committee. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Subcommittee on Business and Economic Development and Signs had a meeting on Wednesday, May 24th at 5:30 p.m. in room 207. Myself was present as chair, Councilor Del Russo and Councilor Scarpelli as committee members. Council President Carville was also present. Building Commissioner Paul Moki, City Solicitor Mark Rumley, Richard DiTullio, and Lauren DiLorenzo from Office of Community Development were present, Mr. President. There were 3 petitions that appeared before the council the week prior, all which were denied by the Community Development Board for a number of reasons. Paper 17-452 was the Evangelical Haitian Church, which is located at 400 High Street in Medford. They asked that we keep the committee, the paper in committee because they weren't ready to present that night. Paper 17-450 is Global Healthcare located at 5 High Street. The owner and president of Global Health was present. Unfortunately, his sign person was unable to be there that night and asked us to keep the paper in committee. And the one report that we did happen to report out, 17-451, petition of a sign reversal by Richard DiTullio, property manager for Wayside Youth and Family, 5 High Street, Medford, Mass. The application 2017-11A exceeds allowable size, secondary sign, and window signage. The committee reported out, Mr. President, unanimously. The first one was paper 2017-11A, the secondary sign in conformity with the primary sign with the designated colors of burgundy and flat. In addition, that the sign be placed in window bay 5. The second denial, which was 2017-11B, we asked that the window sign be of flat color and that the window sign be located in window bay number 3 only. And the petitioner was present at that meeting, Mr. President, and agreed with what the recommendations were by this council, and stated that he was also, which was approved, his primary sign, which was approved, he was looking for a secondary sign. He stated that he was going to have his primary sign match the color of the secondary sign, so we would have his signs both be burgundy, along with the awnings that are on that side of High Street, which are burgundy, to match and have a flow, Mr. President. And the petitioner stated that he would do so with this primary sign that was already approved by the council. So based on our meeting and based on the input from Councilor Del Russo, yourself, Mr. President, Councilor Scarpelli, I would move approval tonight on paper 17-451.
17-451. Mr. Clerk, I don't have that paper in front of me. Motion to adopt by Councilor Marks to adopt the committee report, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. 17451. Mr. Clerk, I do not have that paper in front of me. I don't have the paper. It's not on my sheet. Yeah, it's not on my sheet here, Mr. Clerk. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. 17-451, petition for sign denial reversal by Richard DiTullio, property manager for Wayside Youth and Family, 5 High Street, Medford, Mass. OCD application 2017-11A exceeds allowable sign size, secondary and window signage. 1. Sign denial application 2017-11A, that the secondary sign in conformity with the primary sign with the designation of colors be burgundy and flat in addition. The sign be placed in window bay 5. Number 2, sign denial application 2017-11B, that the flat color sign be granted for window bay number 3 only. Councilor Del Russo.
President, move that this item be approved as reported out in the report from the subcommittee and signs and adopted by the body presently. Thank you,
Councilor Del Russo. Seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion. Councilor Longo
I
Kern.
just want to make sure I completely understand it, because I have the pictures from that week, so they're going to change from white to green, from white and green to burgundy
Yeah, it's gonna
and...
match the photo from the next door neighbor, the sushi restaurant, the colors.
Yeah, so all those lines will be the
It's all
same
gonna be
color.
conforming to that.
Gotcha,
It's
so
gonna be
the,
flat, no light.
no light, flat, and we're granting one on each side?
It'll be one on Main Street, one in the forest. They already
Yeah,
have
he
one.
already had one.
Okay, so we're giving him one extra. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I understood it. One sticker. Okay.
On the motion by Councilor Marks, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, sir. You're all set.
Thank you.
Motion by Councilor Del Russo to revert back to regular business.
While we're in suspension,
While we're on the suspension. Councilor Del Russo was withdrawing his motion. While we're on the suspension, Councilor Longo Kern.
take paper 17485 regarding Evans Street.
17, second by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. 17485, petition by Robert Capucci, 71 Evans Street, to address the City Council on Evans Street water and pipe repair and resurfacing. Councilor Longo Kern.
I'll let the petitioners speak. And then
Name
I'll
and address
speak
for the
in
record.
support.
Thank you, Mr. President. Robert Capucci, 71 Evans Street. Through the chair, thank you, Councilor Longo Kern, for taking this out of order under suspension of the rules. I don't want to seem, selfish about Evans Street coming up here again, because I know there's a lot of streets and sub-water and gas systems across Medford that need to be looked at. But I'm a little disheartened before this body tonight to come and speak on this matter yet again. Through the administration's office, through the DPW, a letter came out saying that contracts would go out in May for the work that needs to be done on Evans Street, that members of this body have said in the past is in the top 5 of worst conditioned streets in the city of Medford. When that letter came out, it prompted some city councilors, when they saw it, in good faith, to tell neighbors of mine and myself that work is going to be done this spring, specifically this May. So a week and a half ago, one of my neighbors, Mr. Robert McGuire, knowing how often I come to the council meetings and discussions I have with the honorable members of this body, asked me point blank on Facebook, hey, well, my nickname's Booch, hey, Booch, when are they going to do the repairs on Evans Street? So I said, I'm not sure. I only know what we were told, what you were told. And then another neighbor of mine in the discussion on Facebook posted the picture of the letter that came out, and it was said that last week somebody was going to bring it up for discussion on this body, and for whatever reason, probably good reason, it didn't come up for discussion. So, and I was going to speak last week on it. So the next day, last Wednesday, after work, I came right to City Hall, and I went into the engineer's office, Cassandra, and I asked point blank, neighbors are asking me, we were told that work was going to be done this spring, this May. She told me, and this is, no offense, but these are the slow wheels of government. Medford has been waiting over 6 decades, for, not Medford, but Evans Street, for repairs that really need to be done. We had a water pipe that burst just before Christmas, this past Christmas, on Evans Street. But what the engineer told me, who also I know is constrained by a lot of projects that are going on, but what she said was, I'm finalizing the contract now. Then it goes to the purchaser's office. Once it gets approved there, then it goes out for bids. Then once the bids come in, the mayor has to choose the best one. So I said, well, my neighbors are asking me, when is this work going to be done? Possibly July. I'm sorry, Mr. President, but with all due respect, I really don't see it happening this year. And now you have to account for, there's 26 houses, 4 on the corner, that's 30 houses. paying at least $1,200 in property taxes, paying God knows what in water taxes. Even the people that rent there, their rent's going up because of the property taxes, the surcharges on property taxes. We're paying a lot. You know, I did a ballpark figure. We're talking over 6 decades. We're talking millions of dollars in taxes from this one street. I'm here tonight to tell you that I spoke to my fellow residents, and I'm not even here to ask for the work to be done anymore, Mr. President. A year and a half ago, this administration ran on a promise on her platform that she was going to dust off the master plan. A year and a half later, Mr. President, there's another inch of dust on the master plan. The citizens on Evans Street are disappointed, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Thank you. I guess I just want to speak in support of this. That I think a number of us councilors have brought up Evans Street, and I believe it was last spring and even before that that we started complaining about it. And last spring, when a number of residents came before us begging, I mean basically begging for some relief on the street. Children who I see in the audience today can't even ride their bikes without, I mean, when I drove down it after got the complaints, it's like torn up with rocks, and it's unsafe. And we were told it was going to be done by now. I did reach out to the city engineer on the 8th of May just to ask for an update. I was told that Evans is in queue for later this year, as we need to replace the water main first. So that's the information I got on the 8th. I'm hoping sooner than later this year. What seems is you're getting information that it's going to be done sooner than the end of the year, which would be great if it could be done by July. But how many times, you know, can we be told, just keep being pushed off and pushed off when it's, top 5, I think it's one of the worst streets. I think it might be top 1 or 2 in Medford from me just driving around and witnessing what's going on. And I just think we need some definite answers, and that needs to come from the mayor's office, who's going to be footing the bill. The engineer is probably doing what she needs to do, and she's being responsive. Obviously, July is better kind of than the answer I got, but what is, you know, really, when is it going to be done? When is the bid going to be accepted, and are we going to pay for it? And I think that's something we all need to demand come a few weeks from now when we are asked for a vote on the budget. We all need to think about a number of different things, including Evans Street, before we can vote on a budget. And I think the potholes and paint striping of our streets and the sunken manholes that aren't taken care of needs to be priority number 1. It's a safety concern. And, you know,
if you drive around the corner and on Pinkett Street, the potholes there, you have to navigate around them to not put damage on your car. The potholes on Evans Street, I mean, there are baseball-sized rocks coming out of the gravel, out of the street.
I've been by there. Next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, we will be having a council of the whole meeting with the city engineer on a lot of these issues, and I urge you to come to that meeting at 6 o'clock.
There's a lot of disappointed people on Evans Street, and this is my neighbor, Shauna Smith.
I understand. Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
Shauna Smith, 91 Evans Street. So I was here last year, I think it was around this same time, and I was told the exact same thing about the budget and approving the budget and not approving a certain amount of money for her until she said that, and we're here a year later, and it's still exactly the same. And I keep hearing later on this year, next spring, and here we are, and it's summertime, and we're hearing later on this year, and then we're hearing July, and it's been, I've lived on that street for 41 years, and that street hasn't been repaved, and she said it, I have an 8-year-old daughter, she can't ride her bike. I have to put a bike rack on the back of my car and drive her to the bike path for her to ride her bike in that neighborhood, because the rocks are on the sidewalk, the rocks are on the street. Pinkett Street is probably worse than Evans. I'm sorry for saying that because I live on Evans, but Pinkett Street is pretty bad too. You can't ride your bike in that neighborhood, and I don't know what has to happen. How do you get the street fixed? How do you get the street fixed? What has to, and everybody, I think except for him, said that it's really bad, it's a really bad street. So everybody knows that it's really bad, aside from whoever's on C-Click Fix checking it off as repaired, because it's the furthest thing from repaired, but everybody knows that it's really bad, and
And you were promised that it was going to be fixed.
for a long time, so
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what else to do. I don't think anybody, I asked my neighbors, I asked my really sweet neighbors if they wanted to come, and they don't want to come. They don't want to come. They don't want to deal with it anymore. They gave up. They gave up, and that's sad. What? Yeah, it's.
And you have right to this one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Mr. Capucci and Ms. Smith for being here this evening. On St. Patrick's Day, 3/17/17, we received a response to paper 17209 from the administration. And this paper clearly said that the contract will be in place in mid-May, and construction will proceed with the schedule thereafter. Now, we put this paper initially on the agenda in October, and I'm at a loss to figure out how long it takes to get the contract in place, but this all should have been done well before the construction season started, Mr. President. And not a week goes by now that I don't scratch my head and wondering what's going on inside that engineering office. I really have significant concerns about the way that office is being managed and what's going on in the community. For us to have to wait 18 months for a response to a paper, for residents to have to wait 6, 7, 8, 9 months for a contract just to go out so that the work can be done that they said they've been scheduling for 3 years, is ridiculous. And I'm not one to go out on these rants, Mr. President, about the administration not doing this and not doing that. That's not my style. But enough's enough. This office has got to keep its eyes on the prize, because the engineering office is far too vital to the delivery of the requisite services that we're here to provide, to be asleep at the switch.
Agreed. Name and address of the record, please.
Jean Nuzzo, 35 Paris Street. I just want to go on the record, too, that Paris Street was also listed as a street that was supposed to be addressed this year. I wouldn't get into a debate about what street is worse. I think on our side of Medford, we have a lot of very, what I call, depressed streets that haven't really been attended to, the street nor the sidewalks. There's a hole that has been in front of my house for 46 years. We haven't been able to, I mean, it's kind of laughable, but it isn't. It keeps getting larger and larger and larger. Our elderly community on our street cannot walk down the sidewalks. It's abhorrent. And often when we attend these dialogues and discussions about development, we hear these developers tell us that our neighborhoods are depressed and blighted. And it really boils down to our streets not being able to be taken care of. So I know we've got a committee of the whole meeting. I'd ask that you consider Paris Street and maybe a few more of those surrounding streets in our neighborhood. It's been quite a while since they've been attended to, and I think it would go a long way for a number of elderly people we have, as well as mobilely challenged folks in our neighborhood. You know, our area of Medford, I think the last time I checked, we have like 45% of the people who live in North and East Medford that are senior and disabled and lower income. So it's harder for them to get around because not all of them do have cars and they like to walk. So again, I know you've got a meeting coming up Tuesday. I'd like to attend as well, and I'm looking forward to that dialogue. But if you could consider our area as well, that would be great.
Thank you. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, you know, it's a shame when you have to have residents come up over and over again on the same issue. And it's even more of a shame, Mr. President, when department heads tell residents that something's going to be done and then there's no follow-up. You know, sometimes the schedule doesn't work according to how it was planned. And all you need to do is reach back out to residents and say, you know what, I might have told you it was May, but now because of the RFP or whatever went through, it took us a little longer. Now we're looking at July or August. And I think residents would feel happy that the communication was there, Mr. President. I think what happens is the fact that there is a lack of communication, the fact, Mr. President, that this council has been asking for a master plan from this mayor for the past year and a half. A master plan, Mr. President, not because we want a master plan for the sake of a master plan. It's to address issues like this. Within a master plan, you would have someone that would go out and do a street audit and say, what are the top dozen streets, 2 dozen streets, 3 dozen streets that need to be repaired? When is the last time they were repaired or resurfaced? You heard from Ms. White that mentioned she's been on the street for 41 years. 4 decades, that street has never been repaved. And I'm referring to Evans Street, Mr. President. And I really think, Mr. President, the fact that we don't have any type of master plan, the fact is that we don't have a full assessment of our streets. We're always chasing our tail. We can't even keep track. We're talking about repaving roads. We can't even fill potholes. Forget about repaving roads. We can't even do the basic fundamentals of filling potholes. Our staff is so undersized in the DPW that we can't even stay on top of a basic city service. And then people are coming up asking about their roads, and they have every right, Mr. President, as Mr. Capucci mentioned, paying tens of thousands of dollars in property tax, and you have to look out and see your street look like Beirut, Mr. President. You get small potholes that could be swimming pools. It's unacceptable. Rocks that could get kicked up when a car drives over them. It's a public safety concern. And it's not, if it was 1 or 2 streets, I'd say, you know what, we're in pretty good condition. We're 7 square miles, we're a big city, we're in good condition. It's not 1 or 2 streets. It's almost every street in the city, Mr. President. And we have no game plan. You know, I attend events, Mr. President, and you see the mayor walking around with all her assistants. Rather than have a pen and paper in their hand, taking down notes when people say, I need my street done, they have a camera, because all they want to do is capture the mayor with a picture. They're not looking for anything else, Mr. President. They don't want to hear your gripes or your concerns. They want to capture the mayor at events by taking her picture. That's what we have now. We have a photo op mayor that walks around and only looking for a picture, when the real nitty-gritty needs to take place. If we can't provide basic city services in this city, we might as well lock the door at City Hall. We might as well lock it, Mr. President. I'm equally as disappointed with this administration. And you know what? You know, when a department's not doing their job, I'll call them out. And I've been doing it for years. But as I stated before, a fish rots from the head down. And if you want to look at who's not doing their job, Mr. President, and who ultimately is responsible, the chief executive officer of this community that runs the day-to-day operations, it's the mayor of this community, Mr. President. I'm not going to point fingers at departments that are shell of departments that barely have enough staff to do a day's worth of work. It comes from the top, Mr. President. You know, and I'd ask our council liaison that the mayor appointed, but she happens not to be here tonight. Actually, she hasn't attended since she was appointed, 1.5 years now. The council liaison, someone that would be here to sit in the audience, go back to the mayor and say, Madam Mayor, this was brought up tonight. This is the concerns at the council. This is the concerns I heard from residents. That's why that position was made, Mr. President, to address issues like this and bring them to the mayor's attention. I realize the mayor can't be everywhere, and that's why she has assistants, Mr. President, to help. This is what's rotten within this community, Mr. President. And I'm tired of talking about we can't go on to new issues when we talk about the same old issues over and over again. So I feel the residents' frustration. You know, I agree with Paris Street and all the host of other streets, Mr. President, because I receive the phone calls and the emails, as we all do, when people say, what about my road? What about my street? And what do you tell them? You tell them to call the mayor's office, and they laugh. Say, I don't even get a call back. Now, we have to be more, Mr. President, than just a sounding board, this council. We have to be able to hold the mayor's feet to the fire. And if people behind this railing are going to give the mayor unconditional support all the time, that's why we're not getting anywhere. That's why we're not holding the mayor's feet to the fire, Mr. President. We have plenty of enablers behind this rail that allow this mayor to go off and do what she wants to do. And then want to talk a big game after the fact. Let's hold the mayor's feet to the fire. Let's hold her accountable to the job she was elected to do, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Capucci for bringing this issue forward tonight. I have been down in that neighborhood a number of times over the past year, and the street is in deplorable condition, and it's been like that for a long time. And promises were made that this was going to be fixed, and it's extremely disappointing that it seems like it's, you know, it's really might not even be on the radar. I mean, it should be, but it seems like nothing's getting done. And, you know, it's long overdue. It needs to get done. And I too, question, why is it delayed? Why is it being delayed? What has happened? And when is the work going to be done? And what exactly is going to be done? So if we could get an official correspondence back from the engineer's office, I'd like to see something officially from her, basically telling us why it has been delayed.
I think this will be something we'll discuss next Tuesday at the council the whole meeting also.
I'm sure we will, but I want to see something in writing, something officially as to why it was delayed, and I want to find out when they plan on actually getting this kicked off and going, in a process it has to go through. Because everyone should be on the same page, and you know, it was mentioned earlier, communication, and a lot of this comes down to communication. And you know, if they actually sent a memo out to us saying, you know what, this was promised last year, but it's going to be delayed, at least when the calls come in, we can say, you know what, we received a communication back from the engineer's office. This is going to be delayed because of reasons A, B, and C. But we haven't received anything back, and the neighbors haven't received any news, and therefore we're all kind of standing around looking at each other. So, you know, a lot of it comes down to communication. And right now, as far as this issue goes, there really hasn't been any communication. So if we can get an official correspondence from the engineers department with those details, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Clerk, if you could make that note, please.
Thank you.
Name and address of the record, please.
Rex Sacco, 21 Ridgeway Road, Medford. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I just came down to, you know, witness the council meeting. But I'm going to go back a few years, just a few. At one time, we had a paper, it was called the Medford Mercury. And if I remember correctly, every year, the city would go out, like Councilor Marks would say, they'd go out and they'd gauge these streets. In other words, they prioritize what streets are going to be done. For instance, not this year, not this fiscal year. Fiscal year 2018, they knew 5 streets, 5 critical streets. Those streets were published in the newspaper, and they were prioritized. So the citizens on those streets, a year before the street was even going to be reconstructed, those citizens knew that they were going to be in for a new street, new sidewalks, whatever the construction is. That gave the administration plenty of time if they had to put a water line in, or they had to put a gas line in, or whatever they had to do. It seems today that the planning, it's like the cart is going before the horse. They plan the street, they get the street planned, they go out and do it, and then about 6 months later, oh, we got to put a water line in. Very frustrating, poor planning. But I just wanted to bring up, but this is the way the citizens of Medford knew where they stood with their streets, the condition of their streets. And it was a very simple thing to do. I mean, I'm not sure if I could ask the council now, do you know what the top 5 streets are in Medford that have to be paved? Does anybody know the top 5? All right, well, you're close, okay? You're the city council. I live on Ridgeway Road. My street's in great shape, okay? Did you go up the top of Fells Ave? You know, Fells Ave. You know, Fells Ave. They tore that street up. It's washing away. You come down Fells Ave to Murray Hill, one whole left side is gone. It's all being washed away. The contractor did a horrible job. Now, where's the penalty there on these reconstructions on these streets, okay? That's another issue. I don't want to get into that. But that's something that the council maybe should look at. Maybe they should go back to the DPW, go back to the mayor's office and say, listen, when we do the budget, we want to know what streets are going to be done. And we want to know not only what streets are going to be done, we want to know, number one, Evans is going to be number one. Number two is going to be Mystic Ave. Number three, whatever, okay? That way you know, going into that budget meeting, 5 streets, $2 million, okay? And it gives everybody right up front what has to be done. There's no going back saying, well, we're going to have to put in gas, we have to put in a water line, or whatever we have to do on that street. That also eliminates a lot of going back in and tearing up our streets. It's called planning, master planning, okay? It may not include a building of a police station, but it's critical. It's our infrastructure. I mean, simple things. I was just talking to the councilor tonight. Go down Salem Street. Fells Way to Medford to Salem Street, all the way down. Not one crosswalk is striped. Not one. You can't even see them. That's our main street. Highly visible, highly pedestrian areas, okay? Simple little things, all right? So, I mean, I just want to throw that out. I don't know if you were aware of it. Some of your councilors might have been aware of it. But there are things that you can do to make the citizens aware where they stand, okay? And it gives the citizens plenty of time to make any adjustments and contact the councilors, contact the mayor's office, the DPW. There might be a tree that has to be taken down or something. It's called planning. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Sacco. Name and address for the record, please.
Sorry, still Gina Musso, 35 Paris Street. I just wanted to add one thought after hearing the gentleman before me speak so eloquently about planning. I think, you still can't hear me. All right, I'll try to talk up. Is this better? I think that recognizing that budget is always a concern in this day and age, and recognizing that some streets need to be put off, if we could even be successful in our pothole repair. So currently what they'll do, if you're fortunate enough to have a pothole filled, they'll do that. They'll fill it and they'll tamp it down. But that's not actually the right way to repair a pothole. You're supposed to actually cut so many inches, a surgeon would call it the clear margin, right? Cut so many inches and then you retamp and you fill with a square. If we made those types of repairs, the roads would look less like patchwork. And you'd feel potholes less because when they're patched, they'd be patched more appropriately. And then the secondary and possibly more important thing we could do, and occasionally I hear it when different developers step before you when they fall under your purview, but what we should do overall is we should never let anybody who's opening our street open up a 1-foot trench. They need to open up a minimum width for a minimum duration so that they have the appropriate space to reset and tamp down, put in the subsoil, put in the proper layers of the different products that are required depending upon where they're working at the right grade so that you don't wind up with the puddle and all of that stuff. And I can forward to all of you, some of you may be aware, but I'm happy to share with you some general links to help you get a little bit more up to speed. But I think regardless of where we go with our repair of streets, we can do no harm, right? So when we open up our streets and we're working in our streets, if we require folks that are doing this work, and they know how to make those repairs, because in other cities, they wouldn't dare open up the street for 1.5 feet for 4 or 5 feet. They'd open it properly and they'd, reset to existing or better condition the same way. And they also wouldn't use hot top patches on the sidewalk where there's concrete. Where we've had some upgrades done, I've noticed that I think it might have been NSTAR that did the gas upgrades. They would cut out the street, the sidewalk, dig that hole out, and they wouldn't properly set the patch and put concrete back in. They just tamp in hot top like someone was going to come later. And we've got some of those on Paris Street that go down the street. There's probably 30 or 40 of them at least, maybe even one for every single address where they tie into the different homes. But those few measures don't really reside back with us. Our budget taxpayer money. It resides to the projects that are being done. And as a city, if we require those things, then our streets are going to look better because we're requiring that people working in them maintain and return them to us in a condition that we're not going to have to be doing repair work in 2 or 3 years. So I just wanted to raise that, and if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share some of those links. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. If we could just amend the paper and ask point blank to the mayor's office, will this be in this money for Evans Street and possibly Paris and Pinkert, 2 other streets that we were promised, will this be in our next year's budget? I think that's really just the ultimate answer that we need, because I truly feel if the mayor's office wanted it done, they would have told engineer's office to go out to bid months and months ago like we were promised. And I think it's really unfortunate we have to ask questions at this stage of the game when in 2 weeks we're going to be asked for a vote on a budget, and we haven't even seen any part of the budget whatsoever. And I think it's a little late for that. We're at the last meeting in May, and we haven't even, like you said last week, they won't even answer you. Okay.
You will have your budget book on Tuesday. I'm told today.
Next Tuesday. So
Next
we're going to meet on the week after, the 12th,
Tuesday
13th.
coming up.
Okay. So, and I mean, I agree with Council Marks. Forget about a master plan. We don't even have the budget book. So I think you see some frustration tonight, and you definitely see it from the Evans Street residents, Paris Street, but you're seeing it all over. I had a gentleman today threaten on Doonan, he's going to call the Globe. I mean, and call the news channels, because simple potholes are just, they're everywhere. On my way to work, to eat dinner at home, and then come here, I think I saw 8 cones and 1 big barrel just plopped on, and my Heights friends will know, plopped on manholes and sewer grates that are just sunken in so deep. Forget about it if a child veered off. I mean, somebody's going to get really, really hurt. Thankfully, most of the grates and sewers that I'm seeing are on the side of the road, but it's terrible. And these cones have been there for so long. They're not even standing up straight to let people know. They're falling over. So I, for one, I did not vote for the budget last year, and I think I gave like a 20 or 30-minute speech why, and Evans Street, I believe, was one of the many reasons. But that's what we need. You need 4 votes for the budget, and I think we need to send a loud and clear message to the mayor's office that, number one, the simple things need to be in this budget, whether we have to use outside contracting or not. We need our sidewalks, we need potholes filled. We need some work on our manholes that are sunken in. We need our streets repainted with regards to crosswalks for simple safety. We had children, a child almost get hit up near the Brook School, I believe, months ago. And I mean, that's just repaint our crosswalks. Never mind fulfilling promises that were made last year with regards to Evans Street. So I think we just really need to come together and figure out what the goals are of this city, and the simple things need to be done. And it's very frustrating driving around this community the last month or 2 and getting the phone calls and the emails and people just stopping me while I'm walking in my neighborhood. What is going on with this pothole or that pothole? I mean, cars are bumping over them. It's something we need to get a handle on, and I think we need some outside contracting to help us do that, but that comes in at budget time when we need to be able to hire somebody to do it.
Thank you, Madam Councilor. On the motion by Councilor Falco, as amended by Councilor Longo Kern. Roll call vote has been requested. And as amended by Councilor Knight, that we get the information by next week for the subcommittee meeting.
Council Del Russo. Yes. Council Falco.
Yes.
Council Knight.
Yes.
Council Longo Kern.
Yes.
Vice President Marks.
Yes.
Council Scott Pelley.
Yes.
President Carviello.
Yes, 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. Motion by Councilor Marks to revert back to regular business, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. 17-489, offered by Vice President Marks. Be it resolved that the city ordinance be drafted that requires any store furnishing shopping carts to patrons to transport items purchased from their store be required to develop and implement a plan to prevent the removal of shopping carts from its property and create a specific plan to retrieve its shopping carts that are found on public property. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer this resolution tonight to address an issue that exists in many areas in our community that abut business districts. In particular, stores that have shopping carts that are allowed to leave the premise. And you only need to drive up Salem Street or Riverside Ave, and you'll see these carts throughout neighborhoods, just abandoned on a sidewalk in front of someone's home. And I offer this tonight, Mr. President, to allow the city to, first of all, get a handle on what ordinance would make sense in our community, and also, secondly, for enforcement, and to provide an arm of enforcement within our community when it comes to this. So I'm offering this tonight, Mr. President, and hope it goes to one of the subcommittees. I'm not opposed to it going to the Public Works Subcommittee or any other subcommittee, Mr. President, but it definitely is an issue that needs to be looked at. The responsibility of the owner, which would be the store, Mr. President, it shall be unlawful for any owner of any cart to permit any cart to be removed from the store premise and left unattended or abandoned on any city street or public place within the city. This would also require mandatory implementation and ongoing use of measures to prevent removal of shopping carts. And shopping cart owners shall implement and enforce on an ongoing basis measures to contain its shopping carts within the premise of its business establishment. I know there's a couple of businesses we worked with over the last several years, Stop and Shop to be one in the Wellington area. They put on a wheel locking mechanism that prevents the cart from exiting the barrier of their premise. And that is one mechanism. You install those locking mechanisms along with an electronic barrier which stops the carts. Another one is shopping carts equipped with a protruding arm or a similar device prohibiting the cart from leaving the interior of the business. That seems to be very effective. And a retrieval plan, Mr. President. Any ordinance that's worth its weight would require the store to submit a retrieval plan to the building commissioner, and they would have a system where they have prompt removal of carts that are located on city property. In order to do this, we would require any of the business establishments that have shopping carts to put identification on their carts. Right now, you may see some faint identification on certain carts based on the store, but that's all you may see, Mr. President. What I would ask is that the carts be affixed with the name, address, and phone number of the cart, the owner of the cart. And also that every establishment that has a shopping cart have a sign at the beginning of their store location that lets patrons know that this cart cannot leave the premise and that there are means to protect this cart from leaving the premise. That way people that do want to take the cart for a walk to their home know that that's no longer going to be allowed, Mr. President, based on the fact that many of these carts are just finding their way on city streets and ending up in front of someone's home for weeks at a time. And really, there's been no relief under any city ordinance to address this issue. We have Wegmans coming in, Bob's Sporting Good, PetSmart, Aldi's in Wellington has a pretty creative way of doing it. You have to put a quarter in to get the shopping cart, and when you bring it back, you get your quarter back. Unfortunately, there are people that are not worried about their quarter and taking the carts and using them to traverse around the community. So I think it's a good way, but I also think they should put a locking mechanism, Mr. President, or another way of retrieving these carts so they don't get off their property. So I would ask, Mr. President, that this paper be sent to the Subcommittee on Public Works. I think that's probably the most likely.
Public safety, Mr. Vice President?
Public safety would be fine.
Safety and Public Works.
To me, it seems like a public work issue because it's a, you know, a cart on a city street.
No Public Works?
I would ask that it be sent to Public Works,
Okay.
Mr. President, and that, similar to the issue with having these big metal boxes for drop-off that are popping up all over the city, there's one, Mr. President, in the Fells Plaza now that's actually manned. The box is probably 15 feet long by 8 feet wide, and there's someone there at the entrance of the box. They open up the big gate to the box during the day, and someone sits out there in a lounge chair accepting items. You know, I don't know where we're going with this, Mr. President, but, you know, homeowners shouldn't have to see this across the street from their homes, Mr. President. They shouldn't have to look at an abandoned mattress where it says we accept books. They should have to look at items that are left out there on days on end, Mr. President, that is just a public nuisance. And, you know, I'm hoping that we can address the shopping cart issue and the drop-off boxes pretty soon, Mr. President, so we can, you know, tackle this very important issue.
So you were recommending that this be referred to the Public Works Committee, correct?
Correct, Mr. President.
Public Works Committee, which is chaired by Councilor Knight, and yourself, Vice President Marks, are on it, and Councilor Dela Russo is also on that committee. So I would hope that your committee would call a subcommittee meeting as soon as possible. On the motion by Councilor Marks. Councilor Dela Russo.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. And just if the council could refresh my memory, and I certainly don't want to belabor the laborious presentation that we've already had, but I was, for some reason I have in my mind that there's already an ordinance on this, or did we not discuss one and it went nowhere? I remember it might be a decade ago, that this matter was before us for quite lengthy discussion. If I could...
the clerk has informed me that a motion was made on this about a year ago when it was received and placed on file.
Thank you. I remember something even
I don't
further
know
back.
if the clerk could let us know where that is. And
Nonetheless, thank you, Mr. President. I look forward to addressing this in subcommittee.
Thank you. On the motion by Vice President Marks, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. Offered 17490. Offered by Councilor Longo Kern. Be it resolved that the pothole on Short Street that is filled with sand be filled in the interest of public safety. Councilor Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. This pothole, I think I brought up a few weeks ago, is filled with sand. It's about 2 feet by 2 feet, I feel like. It's a big pothole. I'm just looking to get it filled. I appreciate they did some pothole filling on Rita and a few other streets that I've noticed, but Short Street needs to be done, and there's a few others, if I can amend this paper, on Bell Ave that I got a call on today.
Bell Ave also?
Yes.
Seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. On the motion by Councilor Longo Kern, as amended, to add Bell Ave on there. Seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. 17491, offered by Vice President Marks. Be it resolved that the protection of our city shade trees be discussed. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I mentioned a few weeks back, for the last several years, maybe 10 years, we've received the distinct award of being recognized as Tree City USA in this community, and we received that award based on the number of trees that we plant on an annual basis, the fact that a certain percentage of our per capita budget is spent on shade trees, and the fact that we have a tree department with the tree warden, which is all great news, Mr. President. I think what we first have to do is recognize that the trees that are lining our streets are an important resource for the whole community and provide shade and protection to our pedestrians. Street trees help clean air. They help lower heating and air conditioning costs. They provide environmental benefits by filtering and reducing storm water runoff. Trees reduce noise and create a visual buffer between streets and private homes. And they also boost property value and enhance the character of a neighborhood. Currently, right now, Mr. President, when work is done in the community, I think everyone would be surprised that you would think the first person that a contractor would have to go to, or anyone that's doing work around a city tree on a city street, would have to contact or be in touch with the tree warden. It's not the case, Mr. President. For most construction work that's performed in our city, around city shade trees, the construction company or whoever's doing the work is typically required to go to OCD or the engineering office. So they don't have to go to great tree warden, Aggie Tuden, to get her professional opinion as an arborist. Also, Mr. President, the work that was done recently on Boston Ave, where contractors did a lot of work on sidewalks that contain trees, the OCD and engineering department sometimes will consult or get the opinion of our tree warden. I have a problem with that, Mr. President. I think Aggie Tuden, who's a very capable person and has done a tremendous job in this city on our shade trees in the community, should be the go-to person as far as I'm concerned. When a utility company comes into this community and start V'ing out our trees because the branches are getting too close to their wires, that's a concern if Aggie Tuden's not aware of this. If our tree warden's not there to oversee the V'ing out. I've seen trees, Mr. President, that really don't look like a tree anymore when the utility companies are done with them. That's how bad it is. These are long-established shade trees that have been in our community for 40, 50, 60 years that are being desecrated, Mr. President, across our community. So I ask tonight, Mr. President, and I think we can do this in two ways: an administrative policy, which can be done through the administration, or a city ordinance, but oversight of construction work. And I would ask that any approval by the tree warden required for construction work, including work by the city or its contractors, or by any utility company that will impact a public shade tree or the roots within a defined distance of a tree stem, impose a fine if the approval is not obtained ahead of time, exception in the case of emergency work, Mr. President. So that would be the first recommendation that I offer, and we could send it to the administration. Maybe the mayor will pick up on this. If not, I think it deserves merit in one of our fine subcommittees. And also the establishment, Mr. President, which we don't currently have right now. We have revolving accounts in this city, which is money that's earmarked and dedicated for certain purposes, for everything under the sun. You name it, we have a revolving account. We don't have one currently for our shade trees, Mr. President. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of trees in this community that, as you know, provide a direct benefit, not only financially, but physically to the residents of this community, and we don't have any type of dedicated revolving fund. So I ask that a tree fund revolving account be earmarked for tree plantings, Mr. President, and also to any fines that are issued by the city for any damage to public shade trees. And believe it or not, we do issue fines every so often for damage to our shade trees, not go into the general fund where the money goes now. That's similar to when our police write tickets. The money goes into the general fund. Meanwhile, we need police cruisers, we need new equipment, we need radar signs, we need a host of things, but it goes into the general fund and gets swallowed up. What I'm asking for, Mr. President, is that any fines issued on behalf of our trees and also any other money that's recovered within the tree program go into a revolving account, and any donations that people may want to make to the trees in this community go into a dedicated account, Mr. President, for the preservation and protection of our city shade trees. It just so happens, and myself, I think it was Councilor Longo, and you, Mr. President, we received an email today regarding a tree that was damaged at Columbus Park. And a picture was sent, and I'll pass it around to my colleagues, Mr. President. Over the weekend, someone took, I would assume, some type of hatchet or carving knife and carved all the bark off the tree from the base of the tree to about 6 feet up on the tree at Columbus Park. And this looks like a pretty young tree, and I reached out to Aggie Tuden. She did go out because she received the same email, and she said, based on her observation, she doesn't believe the tree will survive. And this is only one thing, Mr. President, and it just so happens I put this on the agenda prior to even getting this email, but I think it shows you that, you know, we really need to step up our game when it comes to the shade trees in our community. We're a big asset. For many years, you know, you've heard people say the only thing that separates us from Somerville is we're Somerville with trees. And, you know, some of it's true, Mr. President. The trees in this community, Mr. President, do a lot for our community. And it makes a neighborhood what it is. And I don't think we should take them for granted. This council was very strong for years when the city was posting signage on trees, using our trees to post all sorts of metal signs. It was this council, through its persistency, Mr. President, that stopped that policy of using trees to post signage. And the administration came out with a policy that prohibits that now, and it was this council, and it's something I'm very proud of, Mr. President, and I think this council should be very proud of because, you know, it's important as a community, you know, that we appreciate and respect all living things. And, you know, you may not realize the different animals that live in a tree. That's their home. You may not like squirrels that run around or birds that are doing their duty on your car, but, you know, they live in the trees, Mr. President, and we have to respect them. We have to have administrative policies and ordinances that allow us as a community to protect them and to stop utility companies and any other private company that's coming in and doing work on a public street, Mr. President, from desecrating our trees. So I offer that in the form of a motion, Mr. President, that this be sent to the administration for administrative policy, and that I guess Public Works, again, we're going to be a busy committee with Chairman Knight as the chairman, that the Public Works Committee looks at the creation of a city ordinance that provides oversight to construction work, that gives the tree warden, Aggie Tuden, more authority over work that's being done and approval by the tree warden, and also that we create a dedicated revolving urban forestry fund to fund our shade trees in the community, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Well, I had the opportunity to drive by that tree, and it had to take some time to chop all that bark off. I don't know how somebody didn't drive by and see that happening. Again, you know, you tell the people, if you see something, please say something. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Council President. Andrew Castanetti, Cushing Street, Medford, Mass. The trees are very nice. Of course, maintenance can be a problem. I never heard the terminology. Difference between Somerville and Medford would be we're a city, or they're a city without trees. That I never heard. That's funny. My concern is we got to maintain and take care of our basics. Maintain what we have, let alone building anew. For example, by Riverbend, the term would be Ring Road. That parking lot back there, this hunks of cement that are supposed to be in place to stop cars from encroaching upon the sidewalks. They're all over the place from the snow plowing. They can't see them when they plow, and there's one on the other side, almost in the river, mind you. I'm concerned someone's going to get seriously, seriously hurt. And the potholes, as Councilor Del Russo calls them, potholders, I'm not sure if there's a better way to build a mousetrap. Maybe we should talk to Montreal or some other locale where they have pothole problems big time. and maybe we can learn from the engineering process what would actually hold up. Maybe it has to be cut in a V or an opposite angle and filled maybe with cement if the tire is not going to stay. I'm not that savvy in this area. However, my concern is if you don't take care of our basics, I don't know about Somerville, but I'm concerned that we're going to have like a weekend in Chelsea here. That's my concern with your massage parlors or your hawk shops. And there is some plane noise also.
Thank you. Councilor Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Caraviallo. I just want to go on record as seconding the motion. I think it's a great resolve. I just wanted to see if we could maybe take it one step further. Back maybe 8 years ago, there was a number of residents, and I remember clearly Roberta Cameron was pushing hard for a tree ordinance to be put in place. We met in committee a few times, and I drafted maybe a 2 or 3 page ordinance from some research I did with regards to a few different cities and towns. We met in committee on it, and then it was sent to the city solicitor for review. It's been 8 years reviewing, but I believe it didn't go anywhere because the votes really weren't there to create a tree ordinance back 8-10 years ago, and the administration was not for it. Now it kind of died down because right around the same time, maybe 3, 6 months, 9 months later, Aggie Tootin was hired, and she obviously came in and gave us a great spiel of what she's going to do and how good she's going to do it, and I think that kind of has appeased the citizens, especially over the last several years. But especially after seeing this, and I agree with Councilor Marks with regards to everything he spoke about, I think it's time that maybe we bring that back and try to create an ordinance. If our city solicitor would try to dig that up. I know I have it on my old computer, but dig that up, see if he has done any review. I think this council is a good example of making the changes that need to be changed. We've changed more ordinances and done more work in the last year and a half. I think changed more ordinances than I ever remember doing in a term. So I think it would have support now to review an entire ordinance and make it so we do a number of changes and make it a number of positive, take positive steps moving forward. And a tree ordinance is something that's going to give Aggie Tootin teeth. It is going to give her more power. It may cause her a little bit more aggravation with having, the way we set it up, obviously, which I believe the prior tree warden was against an ordinance because of that fact. But it is something that will protect our trees, and I think it's now is a really good time, especially if we can get the budget done in the next few weeks, maybe meet on at the end of June and try to get the language to review over the summer. I think it's something that this council definitely can move forward and should move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Longo. Name and address for the record, please.
Jean Nuzzo, 35 Paris Street, Medford. I just am thrilled to hear the phrase tree ordinance. And I've had some conversations both online and sidebar with various people who are concerned both for our public shade trees, but also for some of the old majestic beauties that are being torn out that we'll never see again. So I think this is great, and I love the idea of those fines going to a fund that people can also voluntarily contribute to if it's a topic that's near and dear to their heart. And I just think it's a great thing to be looking at. And I'd like to thank you all for considering it and put my citizenry support behind it.
Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I think it's important to point out that our tree warden, Aggie Tootin, was the 2-time tree warden of the year, consecutive years in a row. And I think that we'd be remiss in moving forward without first getting some input and some feedback from Aggie as to what direction she'd like to see this going as well. So I'd like to amend the paper and request that the tree warden provide input as to what she would like to see, administrative procedure, an ordinance, and if she can make some recommendations thereof.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. On the motion by Vice President Marks, as seconded by Councilor Longo Kern, as amended by Councilor Longo Kern, as amended by Councilor Knight. Did I get them all? To be sent to Public Works and to the Mayor's office. And again, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. And then, again, this came out today. Somebody had to take an hour or two to cut all this down. I can't believe nobody saw this happen. All right, this is right in the middle of the park there. People go by it all the time. I'm shocked that no one saw anything happen there. 17492. Offered by Council Longo Kern, be it resolved that the manhole cover on the bottom of Rita Drive with cones on it be fixed in the interest of public safety. Council Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. I'm not even sure if it's a manhole cover or a sewer grate, but it's obviously, it's on the side of the road. I mentioned it earlier. If we could get an update with regards to when that's going to be fixed, because it does have 2 cones on it, and if I could amend the paper with regards to Bell Ave, there is another sewer cover that is probably 2 feet deep with a cone and a barrel on it, that if we could get an update when they're going to be fixed, and that they be fixed as soon as possible in the interest of public safety. Roll call vote, please.
On the motion by Council Longo Kern, seconded by Councilor Knight, with Bell Ave being added there too. All those in favor? Motion passes. Did you ask for roll call, ma'am? Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, the councilor has asked for a roll call. I was mistakenly did a voice vote. If you could please call the roll.
Councilor Del Russo? Yes. Councilor Falco?
Yes.
Councilor Knight?
Yes.
Councilor Kern?
Yes.
Vice President Marks?
Yes.
Councilor Scarpelli?
Yes.
President Carviello?
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. My apologies, Councilor. 17494, offered by Councilor Scarpelli, be it resolved that the City Council discuss the street work that was performed on Clifton Road. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, this, it seems like there's a common thread here. I know I've been talking about this since I first arrived here in this council. And the resident that called, and I took a ride down to Clifton and witnessed the street that was dug up for utility work has now has been patched and now sinking. So again, if we can ask the, I believe it was Councilor Knight who asked the, correct me if I'm wrong, asked for the city engineer to give us an update of all the utility work that was done. And if we can ask the city engineer to please bring that, if she can bring that to the meeting next week, I think it'll be pretty eye-opening to see the concerns and the calls and the issues we've received from our constituents about the biggest areas of concern were mainly because of our utilities not doing what they've been promised to us to maintain a level that our constituents deserve. So again, I think I made a motion a while back that I wanted to halt all work from public utilities that are coming to this rail and asking for a permit to start work in our community. And if I don't, for one council, if I don't get the information that I need next week, and we don't have a sit down with the public utilities and talking about our roads and our streets, I think that something has to be done with this council in motioning moratoriums or delays for those organizations, because when they can't work and they can't perform the duties that brings the money to their businesses, and I think that's when they'll start to listen. So I appreciate the opportunity to address our council with this concern.
Thank you, Councilor Scarpelli. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Councilor Scarpelli for bringing this up. When we passed Resolution 16404, we asked for all of the work that was done on our roadways and sidewalks by public utilities for the years 2014, 15, 16, and to date. But it's been 16 months since that resolution's passed, Mr. President, so I'd like to update it so that that the engineer can come to our meeting next week prepared with this information to date. So we'd also have 2017 included in this report that we're seeking. Also, Mr. President, I'd like to amend the paper and request that the administration provide us with all the see-click fix reports related to work done by public utilities on roadways in preparation for the meeting on Tuesday as well.
On the motion by Councilor Scarpelli as amended by Councilor Knight. Mr. Clerk, do you have all those changes? Seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. 17-495, offered by Councilor Scarpelli. Be it resolved that the City Council discuss the gas station hood located on Winthrop Street. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've received a few phone calls, emails, and concerns about the hood that is the canopy that is being built over on the gas station on Winthrop Street, and the concerns of how large it is, and concerns of what that canopy makes the changing the neighborhood and what it looks like today. So I did contact the city administration, talked to Paul Moki, talked to Jeff Fargo. They were very, very involved, although they didn't have to be. I know that Mr. Moki was out that site many times looking at the canopy. They realized that it's actually smaller than what is actually passed, which brings me to my number one concern. And we hear it over and over again. It seems like every council meeting we talk about this is what happens when it comes to our zoning. This was something that was passed at a meeting with the neighbors that were on site, and there were I believe there were two issues on that agenda. There was one that called for another bay, which was denied, and then the canopy. Some neighbors said that they didn't realize the canopy was on that, said left the meeting. But the biggest concern I have is really not that we can do anything about this now because the cat's out of the bag, it's been approved, is again, the way we're looking at our ordinances that our zoning board, their tools they're given to make decisions. And some questions, some of our residents were, did they see specs? Were there, do they understand how big this would be and how much it would change the appearance of the neighborhood? And I don't know if that's the case. So I know that our city departments did their due diligence when it came to the fire department giving permission for that canopy that needed to be there. I think the new laws state that there has to be some sort of fire apparatus that extinguishes any type of gas fire, and it's actually powdered form that extinguishes blazes that to do with gasoline. So public safety is number one. But again, I think that we need to, again, I know I mentioned the Metropolitan Planning Council and working with them to try to start a dialogue on our zoning and reviewing our zoning, and so we can control or support what's going on in our neighborhoods. And so things like this issue aren't brought up after the fact, and the concerns of our neighbors are heard too late. Everything was done the up and up, and the due diligence of our city departments making sure that the residents were contacted. That was one of the concerns that was brought to my attention, and from what I was told and shown that that was covered, and the neighbors were at the meetings. But I think that we really have to again bring up the discussion of our zoning and our ordinances, because it's issues like this that change the face of our neighborhoods. And until we do that, and this council does that and finds a way to get that done, we're going to keep hearing the same issue over and over again. So again, thank you. I know that I'm rambling, but it's an issue that was brought to our attention, and thank you again.
I think we all received phone calls on that, and we got the same answer. Councilor Knight?
Yes, Mr. President, I did have a question for the gentleman. I was wondering if, because it's new construction and the canopy was put in, is that the new code?
According to the fire chief, yes, it is.
That is the new code. The canopy is the new code.
And that
the
gas
matter-
station's been there for many, many years.
Okay. And the matter was brought before the zoning board of appeals because they were looking for a non-conforming use to the existing city zoning? Okay, great. Thank you. Move approval, Mr. President.
They were supposed to.
Councilor Scarpelli, do you have any more?
Again, no, that was just the answer, thank you.
Name and address on the record, please.
Jean Nuzzo, 35 Paris Street. I can only advise you, as I have in the past, having attended these community development meetings and zoning board meetings. When you attend, there's no real effort made to make sure that residents are able to see the documentation, can clearly hear the documentation. Presenters are regularly advised, speak to the board, and often when you're sitting in the audience, you'll have a back. So anyone with experience in transformational change and change management understands that the best way to deal with pushback and resistance is to make sure that expectations are set. And I think this is another example of the right equipment in these rooms and the right opportunities presented to make sure that abutters and neighborhoods get to hear what's happening. Maybe this could have been avoided and people could have been less upset about it. And I think it's also a good case for more transparency in this documentation. Right now, if a resident wanted to know about that project, they would have to go down to the Office of Community Development. They'd have to request to see the documentation. They'd have to be allowed to have that documentation. It would have to be readily available and not under review somewhere. And you would have to do it right there in the space. And for a lot of people, they're not out of work and home before 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So it becomes very difficult for us to see this. So I know previously we've had some conversations, I think it was in one of the subcommittee meetings, about some software that's available that would make some of these things.
Point of information, Councilor Scarpelli.
Just so I know Jean's going on, but tomorrow we have a meeting, a committee of the whole meeting.
Yep.
At 6 o'clock. The purpose of the meeting is to view presentation of Acela Corporation on the government legislative management program, agenda, minutes, and video streaming.
I think this
So
is the product you're talking about.
That's, just so you know, that's
Yeah,
happening tomorrow.
perfect. And so maybe one of the things we might want to ask them is if there's a module that would allow for a mechanism for these documents. I know some surrounding cities, even Malden, Melrose and Malden, have a good portion of theirs readily available. I don't know if it's through Google Docs or Acela, but I think it would go a long way because most people, if they have the opportunity to see it, their expectations are set. They're not surprised driving home from work, and it keeps from having emotions elevated because they have that information. So I think the software or some Google Docs solution, maybe temporarily coupled with maybe some technology, simple technology in the room so that people can hear a little better, even if it's a lapel microphone and a speaker, could go pretty far with some of these meetings. But just so you have that information, because I've attended a lot and I know you guys have other ones you go to and you don't always get to be at those.
Thank you. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Thank you, and thank you for Councilor Scarpelli for bringing that up. On topic, with regards to maybe just a little more information on what the Zoning Board of Appeals had to approve, I think I did see people discussing this issue, and people were a little upset with the way it went down. But what Jean Nuzzo had brought up, not only does it have to be a resident come down to City Hall between 9 and 5 or 9 and 4:30, depending on the day. I've also heard complaints from residents who aren't allowed to see the plans unless somebody specific is in the office, or they may have to come back another day at another time. And I think that is kind of hampering residents' ability to view plans and to actually, we talk about transparency, but that's kind of cutting people off from seeing what should be honestly posted online. If there's a proposal, I think it should, of any sort, with regards to building or construction or anything that's going to need a variance or OCD approval, that should be something that's readily available to anybody that wants to view it, whether they're at City Hall or not. And I think that would be helpful to the council too. I've come down and reviewed plans, and I went from, I believe I ended up at the engineers department, but I went to OCD first. It wasn't there. So, you know, not only are people not allowed to see it unless the director's in the office, but you have to kind of go through City Hall and try to figure out where the plans even are. So maybe whether it be tomorrow night or be a separate amendment to this paper, I think plans, proposed plans should be online and accessible to anybody that wants to view them, so they know, should I go to this OCD meeting? Should I go to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting? And they'll be able to see it on their computer while they want to decide, rather than searching through City Hall or kind of just giving up on the fight. And I think that's extremely important. I thank Jean for bringing that up, and I thank Councilor Scarpelli for bringing this up too. I was unaware of exactly what was going on with the zoning or with this one, but maybe you can just if you know what zoning, what they needed, what type of permit or override, variance. I'm sorry.
Councilor Scarpelli.
The non-conforming, I believe, was one for code, and then the other one was for the addition of a bay.
Oh, that was denied.
That was denied. So I think that, like I said, I think that the due diligence from our department, city departments, and making sure and understanding that that being a fire issue of fire apparatus, that I know there might have been, the question was that a few phone calls that I got were questions about could there have been something that was maybe smaller or more tasteful for that area, but from what I was told, there isn't. So it's what
too late.
Well, it's not that it was too late. From what I gather is that just from a phone call I just received before I came in, is that the understanding of that type of canopy, you need that for existing gas stations, being that it's always been permitted and always been a gas station, that that's what they had to maintain. So thank you.
Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Councilor Scarpelli for bringing this forward because this is an important issue. And zoning and ordinances, you know, it's one of our biggest responsibilities. We've had a lot of discussions over the past term with regard to zoning and ordinances and a lot of changes. And I think a lot of, you know, when we talk a lot about zoning and ordinances, a lot of it is about communication, but a lot of it is also about transparency. And Jean Nuzzo brings up a good point, which goes into the meeting tomorrow night with regard to you know, legislative software. And that was a resolution that I brought up about a year ago with regard to legislative software. And finally, the meeting's going to happen tomorrow night. But it's important because it brings everyone onto the same page. If anyone has any questions or any issues, what they can do is they can find all that information online. All the boards and commissions can put all of their minutes, agendas, meeting minutes, all of their, anything that has to do with plans or documents, they can all be scanned to PDF and seen online. I mean, all the information that we receive every week, all kinds of memos, reports, all that detail, we get it behind the reel. But out in the, you know, out in the community, no one really gets to see that. And that's the unfortunate part, because really it's you know, it's your government. I mean, you know, you should be able to see everything, you know, with the click of a mouse, or all the data should be at your fingertips. And that's what this legislative software is going to do. And I think it's well worth the money to actually invest in that. I mean, you know, it really puts everyone on the same you know, playing field, the same level playing field. Everyone has access to the data. I mean, I've used a perfect example. You know, Councilor Marks had asked for a number of times for a public safety summit. You know, and if someone wanted to go in and research that, they could actually take a look, plug in Public Safety Summit, and see every time it was mentioned during a council meeting. You know, so they could actually go back and look at the detail. Take a look at the report. We talked about the FEMA document a few weeks ago. It was a 138-page document. You know, we really probably shouldn't be printing that. It's not very green, but everyone should have a copy. The public should have access to it too, and it should be easy to access. All you have to do is put that PDF online, and everyone has access with the click of a mouse. So, you know, it's important that we, you know, do more in zoning and ordinances. We have. I thank Councilor Scarpelli for bringing this issue up tonight. But really, it's one of our biggest responsibilities. We need to do more there. I think we're heading in the right direction. But I think really one of the big things tomorrow night is that meeting with regard to legislative software. I think it really will make, it makes us an informed council, but it also makes us an informed community, because all the boards and commissions will have access to that data and have access to put all that information out there for the community to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and I hope everyone who wants to come will be the 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. Motion to receive and place on file. Seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. 17496, offered by Councilor Scarpelli. Be it resolved that the City Council discuss scheduled work and blasting hours for the construction work located on Winthrop Street. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know how much my fellow colleagues love to discuss, so the last piece is that the blasting that was conducted, I believe, last week over at the new site on the ledge over on Winthrop Street. Moving forward, I know that I believe that it's the fire chief in his department that issues the permits, and I believe they notify. Is it their department that notifies the neighborhood?
Yeah, they have detail there also.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that as I made my phone calls, there will, from what I gather, there will be more blasting down the line. So if we could just ask the chief, and making sure that the school department was notified. I know 6 acres, with today's crazy world that we live in, that they know when they hear that type of work going on that something's happening. And the other thing is the timeline when that's going to happen. I know that some of the residents are, a few senior residents that like to sleep in a little bit, were woken with a big boom. So if we can, just make sure that everybody again is notified with any upcoming blasting if that needs to occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I just would like to amend the paper to request that the notice be given no less than 48 hours in advance.
As amended by Councilor Knight. On the motion by Councilor Scarpelli, as amended by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. All those in favor? Motion passes. Motion by Councilor Knight to take papers in the hands of the clerk. All those in favor? Seconded. Our motion passes. Be it resolved. Offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council wish Michael and Sheila McGlynn a warm and heartfelt congratulations on the momentous occasion of their 40th anniversary. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, this is a rather self-explanatory resolution. I'd like to ask my council colleagues to join me in wishing former Mayor McGlynn and his wife Sheila a very happy and exciting 40th wedding anniversary. I got the opportunity to see Mayor McGlynn and his wife in CB Scoops over the weekend, and they seem to have started off this celebration with good fun, Mr. President. So I'd ask my colleagues to join me in support of the resolution.
Thank you. On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Del Russo. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Offered by Councilor Falco. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council extended sincere condolences to the family of Dennis Archdeacons. Dennis was the Scoutmaster of Troop 416 in Medford. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to, if we could send our sincere condolences to Dennis's family. He was a Scoutmaster down at Troop 416 on Otis Street for many years. Like we said before, you know, he's very involved in the troop, a troop that produced many Eagle Scouts. And I remember going on camping with my son and the troop, and he was very involved with the youth down in that troop 416. He did a great job, and he will be missed.
Thank you. Would you like a moment of silence?
Yes, please.
Please rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. Offered by Vice President Marks, be it resolved that the potholes on Parish Street, on the Fellsway end, along with the corner of Commercial and Riverside Ave, be filled in the interest of public safety. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few potholes, if we could send that to our DPW Highway Department to have them repaired immediately in the interest of public safety.
Thank you. On the motion by Councilor Marks, seconded by Councilor Longo-Kern. All those in favor? Motion passes. Offered by Vice President Marks, be it resolved that the city engineer report back to the City Council on when the portion of 4th Street from Riverside Avenue and the Fellsway be repaved. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. This portion of 4th Street, if anyone's familiar, has been under construction for almost 2 years. It's directly behind the Sunoco from Riverside, and it leads to the Fellsway. And they have done gas utility work there back, and I believe it was finished in October, November of last year. A small portion behind the Sunoco station was repaved, and the rest of the street that was dug up is still gullies and potholes, Mr. President. And I would ask that the city engineer report back to us immediately on the status of the street, when it's going to be repaved curb to curb, and why is it taking so long, Mr. President, on a stretch of road that may be 100 yards, 250 yards. Why is it taking so long, Mr. President, to put that street back to the condition it was originally found?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Councilor Marks for putting this resolution on. I'd like to ask that this matter be added to next week's agenda as well, and we request that the city engineer come prepared to discuss this matter. Thank you.
And Councilor, if I could amend that to also repair the sidewalks that were damaged during that work also? On the motion by Vice President Marks, as amended by Councilor Knight and President Caraviello, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. Offered by Vice President Marks, be it resolved that the sidewalk in front of 39 Stearns Avenue be replaced. The sidewalk was dug up for utility work and never replaced. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. The sidewalk in front of 39 Stearns Ave had utility work some time back. For whatever reason, the utility company left after the work was completed, and the sidewalk was never restored, Mr. President, which creates a slip and fall hazard in that particular area. So I would ask that the sidewalk in front of 39 Stearns Ave be replaced immediately, Mr. President, in the interest of public safety.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Councilor Marks for putting this resolution on the agenda this evening. I'd request that this matter be added to next week's agenda with the city engineer, and we'd request that the city engineer be prepared to discuss it next week as well.
Thank you. On the motion by Vice President Marks, as amended by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Offered by Vice President Marks, be it resolved that the debris from the catch basin located at the corner of 2nd and Middlesex Avenue be removed in the interest of public safety. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. The state was out within the last several weeks cleaning the catch basins on state roads. And at the corner of Middlesex and 2nd Street, they cleaned out the catch basin, threw it on the sidewalk, the dirt and debris, and never picked up the dirt and debris. So it's sitting out there. It smells awful, Mr. President. It looks awful. And I put in a request to our state delegation. Hopefully they'll attend to it. If not, Mr. President, I realize it's on a state road, but it's still a road that has residents, tax-paying residents of this community. So I would ask that our DPW go out there, Mr. President, and clean up whatever was left behind by this particular contractor in the interest of public safety. That's the corner of 2nd Street and Middlesex Ave.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On the motion by Vice President Marks, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. I don't have anything else. Have you else then? Councilor O'Kern.
I know this is something the council voted on a few weeks ago. We got a response on 17383 where we asked for council litigation monies. The mayor responded, the council legislative budget currently has approximately 4,300 available funds and other expense accounts that could be used for legal fees. So I'd like to move that we take a vote to transfer these funds into, obviously, that account. Obviously, that's all she's going to give us right now, so.
Councilor Scarpelli.
All set, thank you.
On the motion by Councilor O'Kern.
And I think that should be okay to get us through the next several months because the motion is pending.
So the next budget is June.
No, if you transfer all that money, all your ordinary expense stuff,
Yes,
all your ordinary expense stuff is going to be, you don't have anything for your budgets, all that, just to let you know. Okay.
Point of information, Councilor Knight.
What impact would this have on our ability to meet our requirements in posting in the newspapers, so on and so forth, if we exhaust our ordinary expense account,
Well,
as required by
special
law?
permit posting, the advertising budget comes out of the clerk's budget. What it is that all your meeting expenses that you're going to have for budgets and stuff like that, you won't have any funds available for that. You won't have any supplies coming up, which is, all this paper that you...
Letterhead.
All this stuff like that.
Business cards.
So it's...
Nothing's free.
But,
all right,
so, okay, maybe we should hold off on the vote and we should ask, let the mayor know that we need some of that money come budget time, and obviously our ordinary expenses are used for that.
Legal fund?
And see if we can get some money just to hold us over for 6 months, because Discovery,
I did speak to the mayor, and I think she was gonna give us enough money to hold us over till the budget time, till the end of
was
this
she
budget.
considering it this, though, I think?
Right, well, again, and then we'll revisit, and that'll be in the next budget.
Point of information, Mr. President?
Yes, Council. Point of information, Councilor Knight.
Normally, when our budget debates start, the first item that we discuss is the legislative budget. Now, we're going to get our budget books, you said. Hopefully, we'll have them by Tuesday for next week's meeting.
Yes.
So maybe we can set up the meeting for the legislative portion of the budget ASAP, because once that's submitted to us, that's the budget. We can get that wrapped up and potentially maybe get an increase in funds there, if it's not already included therein.
So you want to hold that till?
Yeah, and if I could, while we're discussing the budget, we're going to plan on doing like a...
We'll hold that till budget time.
Yes, but on that, are we going to plan on, just for scheduling purposes, are we thinking the week of the 12th?
Well, after the meeting, if we could talk about, before we go home this evening, if we could just stay a second and we can talk about that.
Yes, that'd be great.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Councilor Scarpelli.
If I can, before we go to the records, if my council members can indulge me, I know that there's a couple of announcements. Multi-use path project, there'll be a meeting on Thursday, June 8th, 7 to 8:30 at the Andrews Middle School. I know that that's been a very interesting topic all over our community. It's a connector for, this is so the meetings, the DCR will present and obtain feedback on concept design alternatives for the Clipper Ship connector, a proposed multi-use pathway to be located along the north bank of the Mystic River, downstream at Medford Square. So this is a very important meeting. I just wanted to give everybody a little extra time to make sure they're involved in such a important meeting. I know that the residents of Ship Ave were very concerned about being notified for these meetings. I think it's very important that they hear it. Again, talking to the residents, one of the biggest issues is the path being so close to their decks and backyards, and I just want to make sure that the DCR, one of their proposals might be a path moved all the way to the water, so it's actually over the Mystic. So it's something they've done down the line, down the road near Assembly Row, and it's really a really nice addition. So, and I think that might give the residents that freedom and that they were asking for privacy. So that's one that I wanted to make sure. And the other, I know that a few months back, former President Della Russo appointed me to the mayor for the Recreation Commission, Recreation Focus Group. I'm proud to say that the pilot program is out and for print and online for all of our residents to now sign up for summer recreation programs, which have sports and arts and adventures in space programs, Lego programs, and detailed times where now the city administration has changed where we can purchase our pool and pond passes, and so it's more accessible for our constituents, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of detail and work that was done. I think that, special thanks to Joe Russo, Ally Fisk from the Mayor's office did a great job for all the countless meetings for the last 8 months, and then Julia Damon and Rachel Perry, who have been instrumental in getting these programs in place so our residents can now register. We will be having meetings soon in discussion for a full-time program that the mayor will present to us. We're now meeting, talking about job descriptions and mission statements. So it's pretty exciting. It's something that we heard our constituents cry out and say that they really needed and wanted it, and I'm glad to say that it's happening and it's right in front of us. So please start registering for your programs and send any questions or concerns our way so we can move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work on that.
Oh, yeah.
You did an outstanding job. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and I thank my colleagues for indulging me this evening as well. Team Medford in the Office of Outreach and Substance Abuse Prevention, Mr. President, has done a great job over the past year. Just last year we funded their office, and since that time they've made great strides. Just last year in the city of Medford there were 19 opiate-related overdose deaths in 02155, Mr. President. And through the work of Penny Funny-Alley, our outreach coordinator, and through the work of Paul Spencer, one of the citizens in the city of Medford who's been helping out with her office, they're doing what's called Hidden in Plain Sight, Mr. President. This is a training for parents. And right next door to the council chambers, actually, we have what's set up, it looks like a high school kid's bedroom. And they teach you what to look for and where to look for illicit substances in your home if you feel as though your child may be experimenting or abusing drugs. So I'd like to let everyone out there know that this program will be running through the end of the week. And if anyone would like to set up an appointment, that they can give the substance abuse office a call at 393-2408, and they'll be happy to speak with you and let you know when they're going to be meeting down there. But I think this is a great step and a great stride, Mr. President, in helping parents identify and cope with the issue of addiction in the community, and they've done an excellent job in breaking the stigma that's associated with addiction here in Medford. So I'd like to thank them for their work and really appreciate what they've done and how they're going about doing it. So thank you to Penny and Paul and the rest of Team Medford. But this Hidden in Plain Sight, it's really something else.
I was in there earlier this evening.
I was too. And
Councilor Marks was in there. Yeah. We're looking at it. Very good, very good job. Thank you. Okay, meetings. Councilor Falco.
If I may, really quick, just one more announcement. This Saturday night, June 3rd, at the Chevalier Theater is the Medford High School Band fundraiser. The theme is a night on Broadway, and the tickets are pretty inexpensive. They're $15 for an adult, $10 for a student, but all the money goes to the high school band. I believe they have a competition maybe coming up in Florida, and I think they're trying to raise funds. So if anyone can make it, that'd be greatly appreciated, and I'm sure it'll be a great show. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Falco. Vice President Marks.
Also, Mr. President, this Thursday evening is senior prom night at Medford High School, and I want to wish all our seniors a safe and enjoyable prom night, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Sunday is Medford Day behind, I believe, the Andrews, 1 to 4. Everybody's invited. It was a great time last year. Hundreds of people, a number of different events for the whole family. So hopefully people will join us.
Anybody else? Any more public service before we adjourn? The record has been passed to Councilor Knight. Councilor Knight.
Council Knight finds
How
the
did you
records in
find
order,
those
Mr.
records?
President. Move for approval thereof.
On the motion of Councilor Knight for an adjournment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.